Hi, students, and welcome to the Spoken Word Poetry Recap. Spoken word poetry is a broad designation for poetry intended for performance. Sometimes spoken word poetry is also called performance poetry or slam poetry, so you'll hear those terms sort of interchangeably. Um, Although some spoken word poetry can be published on the page, the genre has its roots in oral traditions and performance. So it's really a form of poetry that is meant to be performed. Spoken word can encompass or contain elements of rap, hip hop, storytelling, theater, and jazz, rock, blues, and folk music. It is characterized by rhyme, repetition, improvisation, and wordplay. Spoken word poems frequently refer to issues of social justice, politics, race, and community. And again, this is related to slam poetry, so it can also draw on music, sound, dance, or other kinds of performance to connect with audiences. So, really, this is a genre that encompasses a lot of other elements. People either love it or hate it. What spoken word is not? Slam poems aren't just rants, and they are not speeches. They are essentially stories that are told through poetry and performance. In spoken word poetry, the audience needs an identifiable character with whom to relate and a clear story to connect with. When you start writing spoken word poems, you have to be intentional in your choices of when to end a line, when to start a new line, or when to split your ideas across two or more lines. So that's something that you can play with as we begin to create some spoken word poetry. These choices on the poet's part affect the way the poem is read aloud or how the poem is read in print. Because the poet, you control the way the ideas are unfolding. And by controlling this, you're able to create tension, you're able to create rhythm, show emphasis, irony, add layers of interpretive meaning. Another thing to keep in mind when you're writing spoken word is that you're not writing in long sentences and you're not writing in paragraphs, as this is detrimental to the performance of the poem. So you're really writing in kind of short lines, but being intentional so that you are conveying some sort of meaning to your audience. Um, Spoken word is meant to engage and entertain your audience. So your words, phrases, lines, and stanzas need to be crafted with an ear tuned to time tested poetic principles. So, using the things that we've learned so far throughout the semester, you can sort of start putting those things together to create a great piece of spoken word poetry. You're also transforming your ideas and emotions into poetic language, and this ensures that the poetry that you've crafted is powerful, clear, and geared to dazzle the listeners. This type of poetry requires you to compose something that's compelling, entertaining, and effective when performed live on stage. Good slam poems are storytelling poems, otherwise known as narratives, and we've talked about that earlier in the semester. Some of the criteria for storytelling: you need a character, you need a time and a place, an action, obstacles and conflict, point of view, and crisis and bullseye. And we'll go over each one of those. The character. Often the persona of the poet speaks in first person, but the character can be anything that you want. It could be a dog, a rock, a pen, a rainbow, um, your mom, your dad, a cruise ship, any type of thing, but you're talking in first person. Like any story, you can mix a variety of characters into the poem, but those are usually best for multi poet pieces. And then lastly, when you're crafting this, consider what makes this character relatable or interesting to the audience. Time and place. So your poem has to be set somewhere to help the reader understand. The setting may be an actual place or a time period in the character's life. So when you're crafting, consider, how does the setting affect the way the story is told? Could a specific setting bring more impact to your poem and deliver more meaning to your audience? Action. This covers movements, purpose, and direction. So basically asking yourself, where am I heading with this piece of writing? Consider, what would this look like on stage? So after you write your poem, how is it going to be received if you were performing it? Obstacles and conflict. No story exists unless the main character struggles against some psychological or social dilemma. And this is a lot of the spoken word poetry that is popular today focuses on some aspect of social justice or some type of social dilemma. Consider what obstacle or conflict your character is going to face and how you are going to resolve it. Point of view. Is the character observing the story from a distance, or is he or she passionately involved? What is the character's where, excuse me, is the character's perspective most clear? Consider, how does the point of view change the way the story is told? So really think about what point of view you want to take on whatever topic or issue you are going to be writing about. And then lastly is crisis and bullseye. Crisis is the point of no return. This is the place where you as the poet really slam down your main idea. The bullseye is when the poem hits the target and gives the audience something powerful to consider when the poem is over. Think of it like a punchline to a joke. So consider, what is the punchline for the poem that you're writing? Where do you want this to hit the audience most? And that is our spoken word poetry recap.